Welcome to the official ABA Law Student Podcast, where we talk about issues that affect law students and recent grads. From finals and graduation to the bar exam and finding a job, this show is your trusted resource for the next big step. You're listening to the Legal Talk Network.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of the ABA Law Student Division podcast. My name is Johnnie Nguyen, and I'm the National Chair of the ABA's Law Student Division. And today I'm incredibly excited to have Mr. Jason Dunn here, who is the U.S. Attorney of Colorado. So, Jason, let's just jump right into it. Could you tell us a little bit more about yourself, your professional background, and then I'll ask you some about your personal background, too.
Sure. Well, it's great to be with you. I'm a Colorado native, grew up for the most part in Colorado. I was the son of two public educators. My mom was a teacher and my dad was a school administrator. Kind of grew up in the Denver metro area, and my dad became a school superintendent up in Montana, so I went to high school in Bozeman, Montana, which was great for my fly fishing skills. But I missed Colorado and came back down to CU for undergrad. After undergrad, I spent a couple years in Boston trying to kind of figure out what I wanted to do, and I was actually working for a large investment bank out there, and I knew I had two things in mind. I wanted to get back to Colorado, and I wanted to do something in the public sector. And so I came back to Colorado, and I was working up at the state capitol during the day, and I was doing a master's in public administration at night at CU. And that actually got me interested in law school. And so I decided to apply up to the law school in Boulder. And as I graduated from my master's program, started up in Boulder and then spent 3 years there and was trying to kind of figure out what kind of law I wanted to practice. I knew I wanted it to have, some sort of public component. I was very interested in public policy and public administration. So after graduation, I clerked for a year on the Colorado Supreme Court for now Chief Justice Coates, who's been a great mentor of mine. But then was kind of leaning towards actually prosecution, was interested in the Denver DA's office. They weren't hiring at the time, and so I kind of went into one of my other areas of interest, which was water law. As your listeners may not know, across the country, water law is a very important thing, not only in the western United States, but particularly in Colorado. And we have it's kind of a unique Colorado thing because it's common law based primarily. And so water law in Colorado is a very Colorado thing. And so it was a fun area to kind of practice in. And I did that for a couple of years and decided that although it was fun, it was a little bit narrow. And so I went to a firm in Denver that did a lot of what I call public or political law, which is everything from constitutional issues to campaign finance law to administrative law. And so I was doing that, kind of litigating those issues when another mentor of mine, John Suthers, who had been U.S. Attorney in Colorado at that time, was appointed by the governor of Colorado to fill the vacancy that had been created when Ken Salazar, our then Attorney General, became U.S. Senator. And so when John Suthers was appointed to be the Attorney General of Colorado, he asked if I'd come over and help him run that office. And so I left private practice and went to the Attorney General's office as his deputy. And I did that for about 3 years. It was a great experience being involved in all the kind of high-level important issues, legal issues that were coming up at the time in Colorado, and working with two different governors, Governor Owens and then Governor Ritter. It was a really fun experience and was kind of enjoying that. And then one day, the founder of a law firm here in Denver, which is kind of a regional law firm, Brownstein Hyatt, Steve Farber called and told me they were looking for somebody to kind of fill a niche that was sort of fit my practice, and asked if I would be interested in coming over to the firm. And I talked to them and wound up going over to the law firm where for about 10 years my practice was, again, what I call kind of a public law practice. It's a sort of a generic sounding name, so it doesn't say, it's not very descriptive, but it's sort of everything, again, from constitutional to administrative to campaign finance to internal investigation, all those kind of things. And so did that for about 11 years and was a partner over there. And I had kind of assumed I would stay there. And then when President Trump won the election and people started talking in the legal community in Denver about who would be the next U.S. attorney, people started asking me about it. Frankly, I hadn't been really thinking about it. And I started talking to people whose opinion I valued and who had been mentors of mine, and said, do you think I should be interested in this job? And they said, if you think you have the opportunity, then you definitely should, because it's a great opportunity. And so I thought about it more and more, and eventually kind of threw my name in the ring for the job, and things worked out well. And so here I am. So it's been, it'll be a year in about 3 weeks that I started this job.
Awesome. Well, a lot of Coloradans are very glad you're here, especially at the
Thank you.
University of Colorado Law community. They've spoke very highly of you, so more reason to be excited to be here. So earlier you touched in on a lot about your work in the public and private sector, and right now a lot of law students across the country are on the fence of where they want to enter, or if they want to enter both in some capacity, they're a little confused there. Right now in law school, student debt is a huge issue right now. However, a lot of students go to law school with this dying passion to serve the public. What would your advice be to law students who are on the fence right now between the public and the private sector?
I would say a couple of things. Number one, I would say it's hard to be good at a job you don't love. So if you go into a job simply to make sure you can pay off your student loans, I don't think you're going to be very good at it. Now, I understand the financial realities people have, and sometimes you have to make those choices. I've known plenty of people. I actually clerked on the Colorado Supreme Court with a woman who was a graduate of Harvard Law School, and at that time graduated with, I can't remember the exact number, but I want to say it was like $180,000 worth of debt from law school, which today maybe isn't as much as some other people have. But she clerked for a year and then was going to a big law firm for financial reasons when she actually wanted to do something in public service. And she was actually going to be featured on a episode of Oprah, because Oprah was doing a show on young people who were having to take jobs that wasn't their first choice because of student loan debt. And this was now, I have to do the math on when I graduated, but it's close to 20 years ago when I was clerking. And so, I think people get in those financial realities, but there's nothing like public service. The reward, obviously, is the work itself, and it's a lot easier to work hard at something when you're enjoying it. As my father-in-law, who's an Italian immigrant, often says, it's not a job if you love what you're doing, and it's just something you enjoy doing and contributing. So I've loved my chance to be in the public service, whether it was at the state level with the AG's office or here. I mean, the other advice I give to young either practicing lawyers or law students is to, I think there are a couple of things that really, at least for me, and I think for other people, lend towards a successful career. Number one is finding good mentors. I've been really lucky and fortunate in my career to be able to have great mentors, whether it was professors in law school up at the University of Colorado, whether it was people I worked for right after law school, lawyers, partners at firms who would take the time to show me how to do things the right way and to talk about how to practice law, and not only the nuts and bolts of practicing, but how you carry yourself, how you deal with opposing counsel, how you deal with the court. And I think the only way to become a good lawyer is to have good mentors. And the other thing that's important in mentorship is that wherever I think young people wind up, they have to find somebody in the organizations who's willing to be their champion. You have to find somebody who will say, I'm going to mentor you, and if you do great work, I will help your career advance. And they will go to bat for you with their superiors. They will make sure you get in a position to be noticed within the organization and recognized for the quality work you're doing. It starts with the quality work, but once you're doing the quality work, it makes a huge difference if you have somebody who's willing to champion your cause within the organization. And the third thing I would say is lean in. That's usually a phrase that's used, in another context, but I would use it more universally and say I encourage everybody to put themselves in difficult situations, take on more than they're sure they can handle, not just in terms of workload, but types of cases. I remember the first time, I wound up in a trial, I thought, what did I get myself into? I took on a big case, and I wasn't sure I was actually qualified to be doing it, but it worked out fine. But I was very nervous, and I encourage people just to push themselves, maybe what they think is a little bit beyond their boundaries, because I think it's a great way to learn. It's a great way to just get experience.
That's great. You mentioned a lot and put a lot of emphasis on the importance of mentors. What was some of the biggest advice that changed your life and your career that came from a mentor of yours?
Yeah. I mean, like I said, John Suthers, who was the U.S. Attorney and then the Attorney General of Colorado, and now is the mayor of Colorado Springs, his hometown where he wanted to go, I think sort of serve towards the end of his career. He always carried himself with integrity and class and tried to be thoughtful and educated as he made decisions, both as a lawyer and as a manager, very even-tempered. One of the things that I remember, the advice he said, that as a public official in a legal position, he said, one of the great things about my job versus other public officials is that I get to hide behind the law. So when you're getting pressure to come out a certain way on a case or on a decision as a legal manager, it sure makes it a lot easier to say, sorry, I'd love to help you, but the law is the law. And when you can fall back on the law, then it makes some of those difficult decisions a lot easier. But, I think it was advice about how to deal with opposing counsel, and that or just others in the legal community, that it's so difficult to build a great reputation, but it's very easy to ruin it. And one mistake, one blow up at opposing counsel or blow up at court or showing up in court one time unprepared, can have damaging effect to a person's career and reputation. And so, I think from him I took that, and from others such as Justice Coates, who I clerked for, was just to do quality legal work, to put in the time to do things the right way, to really work at particularly legal writing. Some people probably do it better than I do, but for me it was always a chore to write well. But it took just rewriting and drafts and putting it down for a while and coming back to it, and just working hard at really creating a good work product.
And I'm glad you hit on the issue of making a mistake and how might that affect your career. But just as humans, even though we're going to be lawyers, we're still definitely going to make mistakes, no doubt. And so I was wondering if you would open, because a lot of students I think would really appreciate hearing this from you, if you ever made a mistake when you were in law school or earlier on in your career that really reflected and resonated with you, and how you came to stand back up after that mistake and what lessons you took out of it.
Yeah, that's a great question. I can think about one situation where I was the Deputy Attorney General. I'd just come in with the Attorney General. I was only about a fifth or sixth year practicing lawyer at the time. And we had a case. It was actually a water law case down in the San Luis Valley of Colorado, which for people not from Colorado is a couple hundred miles from Denver. And it's a pretty rural part of the state, but a big water law case that was going on. It was actually in court for I think a 4-week trial. And our lawyers in our office and the Attorney General's office were representing the state on that case. And the lawyers on the other side were actually lawyers from my old firm. And they were all down there staying at some rundown motel, that both sides were staying in this small town in the middle of nowhere, doing this trial day to day. And they were having some challenges. And the lawyers from the other side called me and said, "Hey, we're having trouble with your lawyers on this issue, and would you be willing to help and to essentially intervene and drive the outcome they were kind of hoping for?" I viewed that I wasn't trying to think of it in a way to help out my old colleagues or do some favor for them, but rather I viewed myself as trying to resolve a situation that seemed intractable between the two sides to help the case move forward and help them reach resolution. And so I sort of talked to the Attorney General, and I reached out to the lawyers. And I think, it bristled the lawyers who were on the line fighting the trial, and they viewed it as perhaps me undermining their case. And that was not my intention at all. And so we also had outside counsel on that case who was helping a longtime water law expert in the state. And so I thought about it, and I thought they were probably right, and I probably should have just stayed out of it. And so I had to call both our outside counsel, who was a well-established lawyer in town, as well as the line attorneys in our office, and explain to them that I meant no ill intention and that I was trying to help them move the case forward in the best way for all the parties, and that it probably would have been best for me. So I think the lesson in that was you have to kind of remember who your client is, but B was that if you make a mistake, just to kind of own up to it and be candid about it. And a lot of times when you have someone who's upset about something you might have done, by sort of owning up and talking to them and apologizing, it seems to de-escalate a situation a long way, and it worked out for the best in the long run. But rather than sort of try and explain it or justify it, it was simply just say, "Hey, I'm sorry, I apologize for getting in the middle of your case, and it won't happen again."
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that with us. I think it's an important lesson for all of us as law students and young lawyers to really get that down. If you make a mistake, just own it and then just move forward. Yep. That's an important piece of it. To those mistakes, and I'm speaking from my own experience, when I've made a lot of mistakes now just finishing 1 year of law school, I could have a tendency to go down this kind of dark spiral of just sitting on that mistake for a while and getting really sad about it. And it hinders on my education or my ability to grow, because you sit on that that just beating yourself up so much. And so I was wondering if you could share advice for law students who, I assume most of us have gone to that little dark spot in our life or during our career, and how did you get yourself out of it and how did you move forward?
Yeah, I think we've all been there. And I think one of the important things that I've learned is that time makes a huge difference on how you view mistakes and problems, and where I've sort of told myself, and I try to tell other people when something happens, a big mistake, and they're very upset about something, I've tried to tell myself, this will look very different a month from now. This will look very different 6 months from now. Try not to beat yourself up too much in the immediate. You're going to if you make a mistake, but allow yourself to also realize with time comes perspective, and things may not be as bad as they seem, if you just give it a little time to get in the rearview mirror.
That's a really important topic for me because the ABA Law Student Division, a big priority that we unanimously decided on was addressing mental health and wellness issues with law students and young lawyers. And so right now we're working with the Commission on Lawyer Assistance Programs for a national fundraising effort and a national outreach effort to really raise awareness about the mental health issues that sit in the legal profession. What do you do to when you're tired or when you're stressed out or when you have those moments where you just really need to get away from the law? What do you do?
Yeah. Well, I live in Colorado, right? So I do a lot of outdoor stuff. I mountain bike, I fly fish, I ski, I golf. So there's plenty of distractions here in Colorado, maybe too many. But I have a great wife and 2 kids who love to do all those activities too. So I certainly try and make sure I get away from work and put things down and try and do some of those fun things just to kind of decompress a little bit.
Awesome. That's great. So I have one last and final, most important question for you. If you died today, reincarnated into any animal, what animal would you hope to be and why?
That's a great question. It reminds me of the first job interview I had when it was the summer right after I graduated college, and I was trying to kill some time before I went actually on a graduate course over in London for a month late in the summer. And so I had to find a job for the summer. And I interviewed to be a waiter at a restaurant in a hotel. And the manager of the hotel was my last interview. And he said, if you could be any animal in the world, what would you be? And because I had a golden retriever dog at the time, I said golden retriever. I've always regretted that answer because it's just pretty lame, right, to say golden retriever. So, I won't answer it with golden retriever.
It's your redemption point right here.
That's right. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's a bald eagle or something like that. Because they get an opportunity to actually see some cool stuff and fly around, right? And the best part is when they go fish, they get to go fly fishing, right? So they get to dive in the river. I just came off the river the last 2 days, so and I saw a little bit of that. So I thought that would be a pretty cool life. So maybe that's the answer.
Your assistant before this interview asked what the fun question was going to be at the end,
and that was it.
I shared it with her, and she said he's going to say something lame like a bald eagle.
Did she say that? Yeah. See, it's probably not much better. I don't know what I would say.
No, it's
because I have a new puppy at home too, who's a golden doodle. So, and he is destroying a lot of things and chewing on us constantly. So, he's ruined it for me to say golden retriever right now.
Awesome. Well, Mr. Dunn, I really appreciate your time. It's certainly been a pleasure and a real joy for me and a good distraction from my studies. So I was happy about it.
I bet.
Well, to our audience members, I hope you enjoyed this episode of the ABA Law Student Podcast. I'd like to invite you to subscribe to the ABA Law Student Podcast on iTunes, Google Podcast, or your favorite podcasting app. You can also reach out to us on Facebook at ABA for Law Students and at ABA Law Student Division on Twitter. Again, I'm Johnnie Nguyen. Thank you for tuning in, and have a great day.
If you'd like more information about what you've heard today, please visit LegalTalkNetwork.com. Subscribe via iTunes and RSS. Find us on Twitter and Facebook, or download our free Legal Talk Network app in Google Play and iTunes. Remember, U.S. law students at ABA accredited schools can join the ABA for free. Join now at AmericanBar.org/law student. The views expressed by the participants of this program are their own and do not represent the views of, nor are they endorsed by, Legal Talk Network, its officers, directors, employees, agents, representatives, shareholders, and subsidiaries. None of the content should be considered legal advice. As always, consult a lawyer.